𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Assalamu alaikum and very warm welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is 𝗙𝗵𝗍𝗍𝗏, a chartered quantity surveyor currently working as a commercial manager in 𝗃𝗏𝗏. I also support PIQS as our IT team, and I also serve as a RCC member in PIQS. On behalf of PIQS, I am honored to host this webinar titled Contract Administration in Practice, a practical-based FIDIC-based session for construction professional. PIQS, formerly known as QSAP, established in 2007, is a professional body with over 3,000 members across Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Oman, Bahrain, and Canada. PIQS is committed to support its members through professional development, chartership, certification, and continuous career growth. As we all know, successful projects are delivered through effective contract administration, not just well-written contracts. Whether you represent the employer, engineer, consultant, PMC, or a contractor, today's session will give you a practical guidance on administrating the contract, effective managing risk, protecting contractually right, and avoiding dispute. By the end of this session, you will get the practical knowledge on the fundamental of contract administration under FIDIC 1999, managing variation, claims, notices, payments, and extension of time, and avoid common contractual mistakes that lead to dispute and delays. To guide us through this, we are privileged to have Mr. 𝗏𝗏 𝗵𝗂𝗍𝗏. He is a mechanical engineer and a sessional contract professional, joining us with strong hand-on experience in this field. As a quick note, before we begin, please post your question in the chat box, and as we go along, and they will be addressed together at the end of the presentation. Also, an attendance form will be shared in the chat box. If you would like to get the CPD certificate, please mark your attendance. Sir, on behalf of PIQS and all our participants, we are warmly welcome you to the platform. Without further delay, I would like to invite you to please begin this session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Adil, for the warm introduction, and I really appreciate you and the great work PIQS is doing under the leadership of Sheikh Hassan. I'm very thankful to you for giving me and all these people an opportunity to talk about contracts administration. So let me start my presentation without any further delay, and just let me know if you can look at the screen and you can see my presentation there.
Yeah.
Okay. So the topic that we picked for today is contract administration in practice, and this is based on FIDIC contracts mainly. The reason for that is in the kingdom where we are based, we are using mainly FIDIC contracts. Usually for procure and build, we are using Red Book of FIDIC 99, and for EPCs, we are using Silver Book, and for design and build, it's the Yellow Book that is normally used. Now, this presentation is designed mainly for the Red Book, but there isn't much difference in the Silver Book and the Yellow Book, apart from certain changes in the scope and certain conditions. So let me begin the presentation. So this presentation will include FIDIC 99 Red Book at a glance, the key parties that are involved, the engineer's role, and different other clauses related to variations, EOT claims, and dispute resolution. Then we'll dig in a bit about Saudi-related considerations, and then we'll move to questions and discussions. It is important to know that whenever we talk about contracts and their administration and the interpretation of different clauses, this interpretation is usually open for interpretation to different parties in a different way. So contractors can use one clause and interpret it in a different way, and the employer or the engineer can use one clause and interpret it in a different way. So we have to see that how aligned our interpretation is with FIDIC, that we do not, so that we can put our argument in a more stronger manner. Okay, now moving on. So what is a FIDIC Red book? It contains 20 clauses. You can specify your own particular clauses. So whenever you're going to change a clause or add value to it or remove something from it, you have to produce particular clauses in there. Okay, and the contract also contains appendices which will have schedules and bonds or other formats. Moving on, it's mainly, the Red book is mainly for construction, and it's mainly for procure and build. There could be an element of small design items, mainly related to third-party specialist items, which could be in the ELV systems or support systems, things like that. But mainly it's procure and build. Now, we have three main parties. The contract is between the employer and the contractor. So these are the main two parties of the contract. But there's a third party in there, which is the engineer. Now, although we have in this presentation specified the engineer as a third party, but it's not necessary. Even the employer can put one of its employee as the engineer. They can appoint any of its employee as the engineer. But if that employee is going to work as the engineer, he's only going to work as the engineer. He cannot work for any other thing for the employer. So it's important to know that the contractor is appointed by the employer and the engineer is appointed by the employer. But the engineer has to act impartially, and the engineer has to issue fair determinations under clause 3.5 whenever required. Now, what is the role of the employer? Employer is basically the owner of the project. He basically manages the whole project. He manages the engineer, he manages the contractor, he manages the designer if there's any other third party involved in that project or any other stakeholder that's involved. He has to provide the site and he has to make payments. What is the engineer? The engineer is basically an entity or a person appointed by the employer to manage the project on behalf of the employer. The engineer has to, like we said, act impartially. It has the authority to issue variations after the approval of the employer. It has to certify payments and it has to make determinations. The contractor, on the other hand, is the party hired by the employer to manage to construct the project. And if he has any claims, then of course he can claim for those. The employer has the obligation towards the contractor under the contract to make payments as the works are executed. Now, we will take a deeper dive into the engineer's role. So engineer, like I said, it could be an entity, any organization, a third-party organization, or it could be any person, or it could be employer's own employee. So, but why the employer doesn't appoint one of its employee as the engineer? Because of conflict of interest issues, and it can raise different questions regarding the engineer's determinations and the engineer's assessments on different matters. So it's always better, it's a better practice that the employer appoints any third-party organization or an entity as the engineer, and then that organization appoints one of its employee for the role of the engineer. Now, it is very important to note that if the employer is appointing one of its employee for the role of the engineer, then the employer has to give a delegation of authority letter providing all the authorities that are being given to that person for the role of the engineer. If the employer appoints an organization And then the principal of that organization has to appoint one of its employee for the role of the engineer with the delegation of authority letter, and the contractor or the employer can also ask for POA, power of attorney. Okay. Now, engineer, what can he do and what he cannot do? Normally, the engineer is going to manage the project on behalf of the employer. He's going to manage the contract on behalf of the employer. It's going to issue instructions. It's going to issue basically determinations on all matters. And it's going to issue a taking over certificate at the completion of the works. Now, what is a determination? What is the process of determination? Whenever there's a claim from the contractor or a variation from the contractor or any other matter that the contractor asks the engineer to make its determination on, then the engineer has to proceed with the determination. It has to consult both parties and then make a fair determination, which will be notified to both parties. Who are the parties of the contract? The employer and the contractor. Now, it's true that the contracts that we normally see by different employers, they restrict certain, you can say, certain authorities of the engineer. For example, normally in the commercial matters, the contract between the employer and the party that has been appointed as the engineer normally restricts the party not to issue any commercial determination without the approval of the employer. So that is something that happens and is in practice. Okay. Now, these contracts, it's very important to know that the contracts that we're talking about are construction contracts. Okay. In the construction contracts, the stakeholders that are normally involved are the employer, perhaps a designer, the engineer, and the contractor. So all these parties have to work together to be able to deliver the project. Now, we are now currently talking about the FIDIC contracts that are usually based on Red Book and perhaps sometimes based on Yellow Book and Silver Book. So these contracts are basically managing the construction works. So all this is focused on, this topic of ours is focused on construction side of the items, not construction side of the whole project, not the design and not any other. Okay. Now, when the contractor has been awarded the contract, there's a clause 8 regarding the commencement of the works, and that's where the contractor has different obligations to provide a baseline program and to commence the works and to carry out the works as per the baseline program. Now, there's a clause which monitors all these obligations. There's a clause for the submission and other requirements of the baseline program. There's a clause for the rate of progress. There's a clause for the extension of time in clause 8. Okay. Now, and I assume with this presentation that the presentation that I'm giving is normally to the construction people who are already aware of most of the contract administration functions. The reason why I say that we're not starting from what are lump sum contracts or immeasurable contracts, we're taking a dive right into the contracts administration. Now, from the contractor's point of view, there are several clauses within the contract that give entitlement to the contractor because of certain matters that happen or occur during the course of the execution of the project. Now, when we take a dive into these clauses, the first one that we get is clause 1.9, which is delayed drawing or instruction. Now, the contractor, in the case of FIDIC Red Book, he has the job to procure and build based on the design provided by the employer. Whenever a certain design or any instruction is delayed, it can impact the contractor. So there's an entitlement until under 1.9. Then there's an entitlement under 2.1 regarding the access. The employer has to provide access to the site to the contractor, because the contractor has to execute works on the site. So if he doesn't have the access, he cannot execute the works. Then we have errors in the employer-related documentation. We have unforeseen physical conditions at site. So, and then we have, whenever the contractor is working, for example, carrying out excavation, then he might come into, he might find some fossils or any other artifacts that can cause delay, because they are to be dealt specifically in line with the law, and the law enforcement agencies come and take over possession of these items. So there can be a delay based on that. Then we have tests on completion, we have extension of time, delay by authorities, suspension, or delays in tests on completion. We could have adjustment due to changes in the law. We can also have adjustment due to other reasons, price escalation. But normally in Saudi, this clause is omitted from the contract. There are other ways to claim price escalation. When we talk further or we discuss further, we can go into that. Then we have contractors a right to suspend works or slow down works if there's a default by the employer on payments or payment certifications. Then we have consequence of employer's risks. If we talk about Red Book, then there's one big risk that is added, that is the design. And if we talk about Yellow Book or Silver Book, then normally that risk is not on the employer. Then we have force majeure that can also lead to extension of time and cost. Now, if you see here, in most of these entitlements, we are mentioning EOT, extension of time, plus cost, plus profit. And in FIDIC, there are quite a few clauses that give the contractor the entitlement to profit. But if we see the contracts that are being executed between the parties, they usually omit the profit from these entitlements, and usually the entitlement is EOT and cost only. Now, the notices, normally we have to give notice under clause 20.1. And under clause 20.1, we have a time bar of 28 days for most of these entitlements. Whereas in force majeure, we have to give a notice within 14 days. Now, I have taken this text from clause 1.9. So I want to highlight to you what is your entitlement if you are the contractor, and what is the entitlement the engineer should look at or the employer should be careful of. So if the drawings are delayed, or if there's an instruction that is required for the execution of work, whether that instruction should include design or anything else, if that is delayed, the contractor can issue a notice. Now, but before he issues a notice for the entitlement, the contractor should first give an early warning notice, because this very clearly says that the contractor shall give notice to the engineer whenever the works are likely to be delayed or disrupted. So before the works are going to be delayed or disrupted, you have to give a notice and tell the engineer that the works are likely to be delayed or disrupted if a certain instruction or drawing is not issued to the contractor within a particular time. Okay, so for example, we go back to the baseline program, and on 1st of January, a certain drawing has to be issued. For example, IFC drawings have to be issued on 1st of January so that the contractor can carry out its work of doing the engineering and procurement, blah, blah, blah. So let's say the contractor has to issue this notice before 1st of January and within a reasonable time. So let's say 1 week before or 2 weeks before or a month before 1st of January, he has to issue an early warning notice to the engineer so that the engineer and the employer can ensure that the IFC drawings, in this case, which we are talking about, can be issued on time. Now, this is a very important part of a notice. When you issue a notice under clause 20 point, basically, you have to issue an early warning notice here. And before you can issue a notice under 20.1, you have to have this notice. And this is where a lot of contractors fail. And this is where a lot of engineers fail as well. Because the engineer, if the contractor right away jumps to a notice under 20.1 and declares his entitlement under 1.9, the engineer fails to recognize that there should have been an early warning notice. So this is something that needs consideration. Now, you have issued an early warning notice, only then your notice under 20.1 for entitlement under 1.9 will become valid. So you give a notice here, then now you have suffered delays and incurred cost as a result of this delay, okay, as a result of drawings not being issued or instruction not being issued on time. So you issued an early warning notice, but still you did not get what you requested in terms of drawings and instructions, what was required, not what you requested, but what was required, okay? So then you will issue a notice under 20.1 stating that you are entitled to an extension of time and a payment for that cost. After you give this notice, engineer has to proceed with determinations. So I hope you understand that how these notices are to be managed. Now, even though 1.9 does not say early warning, but the wording here says that you have to warn the engineer prior to any delay has occurred, okay, within a reasonable time. Another important thing here to see is if you suffer delay and incur cost. So your entitlement is only the delay you have suffered and the cost you have incurred plus profit here. But let's skip the profit for now because mainly in GCC we remove this in the particular clauses. So what is the suffered delay and the incurred cost? That is important to know. The delay you suffer is the delay for which someone else is responsible for, not you, because the contractor can also delay the works. The second is cost. The cost that you incur should be the actual cost. Okay, so you have to substantiate the actual cost. Now, some contractors take the liberty of submitting costs as per the preliminaries. But remember, it is the incurred cost. It's not the cost of the prelims because normally those contain profit. Okay, moving on. Now, I want to talk about clause 20.1. A lot of people mix all these clauses that we have mentioned here, okay? Now, whenever you have a claim event or a entitlement event under these clauses, these clauses are for entitlement. These tell you what is your entitlement, what should the notice include. But you have to give a notice under 20.1 when you are claiming any entitlement under the contract. So what will happen? Let's say I do not get the site access on time. Then I have to write a notice under 20.1. So I will go like this. The contractor notifies the engineer under clause 20.1. Now, I did not get the site access right. So what is my entitlement? My entitlement is under clause 2.1. So I will continue by saying that the contractor considers itself entitled under 2.1 to what? Extension of time and cost. Okay? Again, my notice is going to go under 20.1, and then I'm going to mention my entitlement under these clauses, whichever applies. Okay? So it is important to know what are the requirements of such notice. So these requirements are stated in 20.1, and these requirements are stated in those particular clauses that we've mentioned. Now, you have to give this notice within 28 days of when you should have become aware of the event. So let's say you were supposed to get access on 1st of January and you do not get access on 1st of January, then you have to send this notice by 28th of January. Okay? Now, same goes with the drawings. You're supposed to get drawings on 1st of January. You didn't get them. Then this notice, and this notice is also conditional upon the earlier notice because it is a further notice in this case. So it should be issued by 28th of January. If the contractor does not give a notice within 28 days, then the employer will be discharged from all liability. So under the contract, the contractor does not have an entitlement because he has not issued a notice on time. It is important to know that all such notices and follow-up claims should have supporting particulars, should have contemporary records, should have all substantiation. Okay? Whatever information you have at the time of the notice, you have to provide that information. Moreover, different clauses ask for different things when you're providing a notice under 20.1 for such entitlements. Okay? And if you are the contractor, you need to make sure that whatever information that is required is provided. For example, under 1.9, you have to have an early warning notice. Okay? So if that is not provided, your 20.1 notice is going to be invalid. It's going to be rejected. Okay? And we can talk about other clauses here. So when, for example, you find fossils, there should be an evidence of that in your notice. Okay? If there are errors in the documents provided, you cannot just send a notice. You have to provide evidence of that. Okay? So if you do not provide, if you just write a notice that there were errors in the documentation and this is my notice, then that notice will not land. So do not think that you have to provide the evidence at the time of the claim. You have to provide reasonable evidence to establish your entitlement. Okay? We're talking about delay caused by the public authorities. When you talk about that delay, you have to provide the evidence for that. Okay? So let's move on. And the engineer can reject your notice if that evidence or those supporting documents are not provided. It is important to note further, although we haven't put that in the slides, but you have then 42 days to submit a claim. And if the event, any delay event or any claim event is ongoing, then you have to submit monthly all these supporting documents and you have to update your claim monthly. This is the requirement of FIDIC. Normally, it's not practiced that way, and the engineer and the employer allows you to take some more time and to submit comprehensive claims. You add in all the delay events or claimable events and you submit a comprehensive claim. Now, what is required in the comprehensive claim? Now, we talked about both the delay and the cost element. They have to be properly substantiated, and the engineer has the right to audit you. The employer has the right to audit you on that, okay? Now, what is the substantiation for a delay? The substantiation for a delay is a delay analysis, and the details of which will be given in the contract normally. Okay, these requirements include time impact analysis, which can have window analysis or as built versus as planned analysis. So there are different types of analysis that can be done, and the contract has to specify what is required under the contract. And then again, there are different types of analysis required at different stages. For example, when you are claiming a delay that's ongoing and will be closed in the future, normally you do time impact analysis. But when you are doing a claim at the end of the project, then it's better to do as built versus as planned analysis. So it depends whether you are looking at retrospectively or prospectively, okay? So what is the second element here? The cost. And like I said, let's not talk about the profit here, because in GCC, this is usually omitted from the contracts. Now, what is the cost? The cost is, if you have a delayable event, then the cost is your time-related preliminaries, but not from the BOQ, your actual cost. The salaries of your people, the expenses of your side offices, okay, the insurances, the bonds extensions, okay, the cranes and other such items that serve a site as a whole, but this will not include specific equipment that you use, let's say, for excavation or for anything else, okay? This will include the equipment like cranes or any other such equipment that is serving the whole project or a particular area if the delay is in that area, okay? Now, if we talk about these are the cost entitlements that you may have, and this is how you will substantiate. You will provide all the records, you will provide all the bills, and then you will establish that cost, okay? Now, there is one element of the cost that is usually not claimed, and due to conflict of interest, I cannot talk about that, and in this session, that's why I'm not gonna proceed with that, and I'm gonna keep the cost as is for now, the time-related cost for any delay. But there's one more element of the cost that is claimable and should be claimed in such claims. Now, there's an interesting clause, 8.9, which is suspension. Now, if you talk about the suspension claims, that are slightly different from the extension of time claims. Now, the suspension, it is important that the suspension should be instructed by the engineer. Okay, when the suspension is instructed by the engineer, and obviously there is a chance that the contractor may have equipment and manpower mobilized in that suspension when that suspension occurs. Now, suspension will lead to two things. The number one is extension of time. So there will be a claim for time-related costs, as I discussed before. But suspension can also lead to what do we call it, man hours that are disrupted, basically idle man hours or idle equipment, okay? So there will be a direct cost impact of suspension when you're claiming suspension claims, okay? So whenever an engineer instructs you to suspend all the works or suspend part of the works, then it is important for the contractor to send a notice. And with the notice, the contractor has to ask a question and has to highlight the equipment that is mobilized, and then ask a question whether these equipment or people should remain mobilized or you should demobilize them. Okay, you should not demobilize them on your own. You should always ask this question of the engineer. Okay. And if you're the engineer, then whenever you're going to instruct a suspension, you're going to say that the contractor has to carry out all measures to reduce the impact of such suspension. Anyway, now the contractor highlights and with evidence that this is his equipment and this is his manpower that is mobilized in the whole of the site, if the suspension is for the whole of the site, or for the works, for the limited works. Okay, and then the engineer can be in a better position to tell you whether to mobilize or use this elsewhere. Firstly, the engineer is going to respond by saying, if you can utilize this manpower and equipment on other parts of the site, if it is a partial suspension, then he will right away instruct you to do that. If you can do that, then the contractor has to do it. If the contractor cannot do it, then a whole lot debate will go on, and the contractor will be asked to carry out its best practices to minimize the impact of such suspension. Okay, I hope that's clear. And it's a big topic, suspension. But the important thing is you highlight what you have mobilized and you ask the question in your notice. Now, let's move on from entitlements and claims, and let's move towards variations. Now, from time to time, it is the right of the employer that he can change some of the works, and then he will issue an instruction to the engineer or discuss it with the engineer, that the instruction to the contractor has to come from the engineer. They can ask for proposals, or they can directly instruct you a change, and the contractor has to carry out the works as per that change. Now, clause 13.1 is right to vary. Okay, the engineer can vary the works whenever the employer asks him and whenever it's required. Okay, the contractor then needs to proceed with, if these works are varied via an instruction under 3.3, then the contractor has to proceed with the vary works. If the engineer only asks for a proposal, then the contractor has to submit a proposal, and until an instruction comes on the variation, he is not obliged to, or he should not execute those works. Okay, it is very important to note that. It is also possible that the variation that is being instructed cannot be executed. In that case, the contractor has to issue a notice within 14 days to the engineer with the reasons, with the evidence why he cannot execute those works. Okay, now let's talk about what happens in these cases. Normally, engineer issues an instruction under 3.3 and issues you revised drawings. Okay, now this instruction is under 3.3, and the revised drawings that have been issued are IFC drawings issued for construction. It means that the instruction is very clear. It is asking the contractor to issue to execute the works as per the revised drawings. Now, the contractor has to ensure that he starts working as per the revised drawings, and he has to see if there is any variation due to the revised drawings, or if there is any work that was executed, now it needs to be demolished, something needs to be demolished, or there is any rework in this case. Then the contractor has to proceed with a variation proposal. Now, this variation proposal, what should it include? Number one, it should include the direct cost impact, basically the direct cost for the execution of the engineer of that variation. Number two, perhaps this variation will lead to an extension of time. So the contractor then will have to provide a delay impact analysis with the variation proposal and claim for the prolongation cost. Okay. Then what else will have an impact due to this revised drawing? There could be any rework element, so the contractor has to price for that, or there could be a demolishing impact. So these should be although included in the direct cost impacts, by the way, with such headings. Then obviously there will be overheads and profits as agreed under the contract, and the contractor will be allowed to put those as well. I hope that's clear. Now, the engineer there could be an omission as well from the scope. So variation can lead to additional work as well, and variation can lead to an omission as well. Okay, which is supposed to reduce the cost. So it is very important that when something is omitted, you omit that, but if there is any positive impact, you add that in the variation proposal. Okay. Now, engineer can also ask you for a value engineering process to reduce the cost. So something in your project, let's say your project was steel structure, then the engineer asks you to change it to concrete structure, the cost will be lowered. And as per FIDIC, the contractor has the right to 50% of the cost saving. But this could be different in your contracts with the employer, and this might be omitted from your contracts with the employer. Then you can request the employer in your variation notices or letters, via letters, that, okay, we'll proceed with this value engineering proposal, but this is reducing our revenue and our profit, so we have the right to claim that. Or you can agree with the employer that you get a percentage of the cost saving. Now, how variations are valued? First of all, whenever a variation is instructed, it may have only a change in quantities. So if there's an already included item in your scope of work and there's a change in the quantities, then you'll apply the BOQ rates. The BOQ rates are inclusive of everything, overhead and profit as well. So it's an easier way to handle variation. But if it is an item within the BOQ, but not the exact same item, for example, a pipe size changes, or duct sizes change, or there's a cable size that change, or any other item, tile is similar but the size has changed, so you can go and agree a pro rata rate with the engineer on those as well. Now, but if there is a new item that for which there is no reference BOQ rate, then you have to substantiate your cost. How is cost substantiated? There will be a material cost element to it, for which you have to provide, normally in practice, 3 quotations. And then there's an installation factor as well, for which you have to provide man hours and the man hour rates. So that's why the rates will be agreed and substantiated and then agreed with the engineer. And obviously you have the right to overhead and profit. Normally overhead and profit should be stated in the project. If it's not, then it should be agreed with the engineer and the employer. If man hours, so there could be one more element there, day work schedule, okay, where you provide man hour rates for your people. Engineer can also instruct an instructive variation saying that please carry out this variation works, and the rates will be managed through day work schedule. Day work schedule includes your man hour and management daily rates or hourly rates. Payment mechanism. It's very important to know how you are going to get paid. There will be advance payments, there will be interim payments throughout the duration of the project. Now, every month when you have executed the works, you're going to issue a interim payment application. The engineer has to review and certify that payment application within 28 days. Then the employer, as per FIDIC, has to pay within 28 days or 56 days. It could be different in your contract. And same is the case followed with the final payment certification. Now, when you are putting forward an interim payment application, you have to make sure that all your bonds are valid, all your insurances are valid, and any other documentation requirement under the contract has been provided. Now, for all the works, you have to provide MIRs, WIRs. If there's testing commissioning involved, then the testing commissioning report should be there. If there's material offsite payment, then you have to provide, let's say, the vesting certificate and the insurance proof of that material that is offsite. If just material on site, then you have to provide the MIRs in that case, which will include delivery notes and other documentation. So let's say, and then let's talk about retention. There could be retention applied on your payment. Retention is the money retained by the employer when you do works. A part of your money is retained by the employer, so that when you complete the works, then that part of the money will be released to you at that point. Normally, retention is paid in two parts. First part is issued at taking over certificate, and the second part of the retention is issued when the performance certificate is issued. Now, what is a taking over certificate and what is a performance certificate? When the works are completed as per the contract, then the contractor applies for a taking over certificate stating that I have completed the works. Now, please review the works and issue me a taking over certificate. The engineer has to go through all the works that have been completed, has to check all the documentation. If all is fine, then the engineer will issue the taking over certificate. This means works have been completed. This is your taking over certificate, and the first retention will be released then. What is a performance certificate? Performance certificate is when, so let's say normally in contracts, there's a defects liability period, which is usually 1 year from the taking over certificate. And that's the duration for which the contractor is liable for defects. Now, when this liability ends and the contractor has carried out all its obligations under the contract during this period, then a massive liability has been released from the contractor, and a performance certificate will be issued to the contractor, and then obviously the second half of retention will be released, and the performance bond that has been submitted by the contractor will be released. Now let's talk about some further, although we already have, but let's take a deep dive into the contractor's claims. Now, clause 20.1 triggering basically opens the door for the claims. Okay, this is the clause under which you're going to give a notice. The triggering event could be any event that should be linked to one of the clauses that give you entitlement, like delayed drawings or side access or any other matter. Now, when we're talking about these claims under different clauses, you have to give a notice within 28 days. You have to give a detailed claim in 42 days. And on monthly basis, you are going to submit interim claims until the claim or the event leading to a claim ends. And then the engineer has to determine. Normally, there is no time bar for the engineer to determine such costs. So what is the contractual basis of that claim? This is basically your entitlement, the specific clause. What is the narrative? How that event occurred and why that event is causing you delay and cost. Program impact, that's the delay analysis. Detailed cost buildup, how you're going to substantiate that cost, how you're going to provide all these bills and invoices and any other such cost supporting documents. Records can include everything. And then you have to clearly quantify the whole amount of the claim so that it can be clearly seen through. Now, I have remembered something that we haven't discussed in our discussion when we were discussing entitlement. So let me go back there. Although we talked about the claims and it should be fairly clear, there are two cases that I want to discuss further in detail. One is 17.4. I brushed upon it slightly. Now, these are the employer's risk for which the employer is liable and the contractor can have entitlement. War, riots, other matters that are beyond the contractor's control. And if you're talking about the Red Book, and I told you the design will be added in there. If we're talking about yellow and silver book, the design will not be in there. So these are the employer's risks, and you can have a claim for that. If you miss an entitlement under 1.9, design is a bigger issue, then you can go in 17.1. Depends on your interpretation of the contract. And let's see how much wiggle room the engineer gives you. There's another clause, 16.1, where you, as the contractor, have the right to suspend works. That is the case when the employer is unable to pay you on time, or the engineer doesn't issue you a payment certificate on time. Then normally you have to give a first notice of 28 days under FIDIC, and usually 60 days in different contracts in the kingdom. You have to give a notice stating that I have not been paid. That was the due date. I didn't get paid, or that was the due date for payment certificate. I didn't receive the payment certificate. So I'm giving you a 28 days notice. And if I do not get paid within those 28 days, then I have the right to suspend works or to slow down works. Okay, this is very important. And when you suspend or slow down works due to employer's default or the engineer's default, then you can obviously, when further as a consequence of this delay, you can claim cost. And then there's a force majeure clause that I want to discuss. Now, force majeures, in FIDIC 99, we have the clause of force majeure, and we talk about wars, riots, hostilities, and other disasters as force majeure, whereas FIDIC 2017 called them as exceptional events. Now, when such events happen, and there is a condition that these events, most of these events, have to happen within the country where you're executing the works, okay? So when such an event occurs, it can affect the performance of the contractor. And this impact of the performance can lead to extension of time and cost in some of those cases, but it can also impact the performance of the contractor indefinitely. And when such an event occurs that the contractor can no longer perform, then the contractor can proceed towards termination under the law. Okay? So that is one thing that we can discuss and debate about, but it is very important to know. Now, going back to the contractor's claims, we've covered this part fairly comprehensively. Now, moving towards dispute resolution. Now, let's say you had a claim or you had a matter that required engineer's determination. You do not agree with that determination. So what you can do is request the principal of the engineer to reconsider that determination. If that doesn't happen, the determination is not reconsidered, or there's a dispute, then you have to send a notice of dispute, and then you have to proceed with the steps of dispute resolution. Now, in FIDIC, there's DAB, Dispute Adjudication Board, there is amicable settlement, and there's arbitration. Now, DAB is not practiced anymore in most contracts. Normally, it's amicable settlement or settlement through a third-party expert, and then there's arbitration. So we will focus on these two. The contract says that there's 56 days period from the notice of dispute when you have to discuss and try to resolve this matter amicably. Engineer is going to bring the parties on board, and the matter will be discussed by the senior management. And if the matter is resolved amicably, then whatever is agreed will become part of the contract, or variation or amount or what time, whatever it is, it will be issued. But if there is no agreement within this period, then the contractor or the employer can send a notice and proceed with arbitration. Now, in most cases, arbitration is done through ICC rules, and arbitration will have a seat. And if we are in Saudi, then the Saudi law will apply. Arbitration is a bigger topic, which we will discuss in a session later on. Now let's talk about some of the Saudi-specific considerations that are done when the contracts or laws are being discussed. Now, Saudi has a law which prohibits any type of financing costs or interests. So these are usually dealt as administrative fees. BOQ and pricing, it's fairly regular. And when you're doing BOQ and pricing, it's important to know that you follow the method of measurement while preparing the BOQ and pricing, and while doing the variation proposal preparations, okay? Because sometimes what happens is, let's say 𝗪𝗻 is the method of measurement, and the BOQ, the original contract BOQ was formed as per 𝗪𝗻. Every every item was measured properly. But later on, when variations are there, sometimes there are people who do not know what is the built-in rate as per 𝗪𝗻 and what is the what should be considered whenever a variation comes. Okay, so there can be conflicts there. Anyway, it is important that whenever you have FIDIC contract or any other contract, there are risks associated with. When you are doing pricing, you have to consider those risks. VAT and zakat, they have to be considered. VAT for everything, obviously. Zakat, if you're talking about your profit, when you're estimating your profits, you have to consider what you're going to pay for zakat. Defects notification period, you have to ensure that your performance bond is until you get the performance certificate, so you have to consider that cost in. Now, there could be a termination from convenience by the employer. There's a clause fairly used in the KSA projects. It's important that you price that risk in as well. And we talked about the EPC contracts. They use Silver Book normally. Now, sometimes you have a contract with conditions of contract. There are no general conditions of contract, and there are no particular conditions of contract. So that is fairly simple. You look at the conditions and you know how to apply those conditions. But if you're using FIDIC and you make any change there, it is important that you make that change through a particular condition. Like we talked about, there is a 28 days notice, a time bar for notice. If you want to change it to 14 days, then you have to do it in particular conditions. Any other value addition or deletion, it has to be done through particular conditions. So always check the particular conditions. Always check the time bars. That's very important. Always check what is required to be provided in a notice, because there could be some additional items added in the particular conditions that you will have to provide in order to comply with the notice. Otherwise, your notice will be rejected. It is important to keep contemporary records, and it is important to understand the obligations of all parties. Another thing that it is important to see is the indemnity clauses. Okay, on your defaults, the employer or the engineer can ask you to indemnify the employer, and if you have, which you should, and under the contract you're gonna do it, even if you don't do it, then it is implied. You need to know that you lose your entitlement in those events when the indemnity occurs under the contract. Now, that's all from my side. I tried to cover a lot of things briefly. And I think from clause to clause, we can have bigger sessions because the contracts are quite comprehensive and there's a lot to be discussed. There is always difference in interpretation by different parties. So discussion always leads to better knowledge and understanding of the contract. That's all from my side.
Thank you. Thank you, 𝗂𝗵𝗲, for the wonderful presentation. It was very knowledgeable. Now let's move to the question and answer. What has been okay? Yeah, the first question was from Anwar Ali, and I think you have covered already this one. The employer can be an engineer and the employer at the same time.
Look, the employer cannot be the engineer.
Yeah.
The employer can appoint one of its employee as the engineer. Okay.
Yeah.
So when the employer, let's say like Adil, you're working for 𝗃𝗵𝗲, when in one of the contract, 𝗃𝗵𝗲 appoints you as the engineer, then you're only the engineer. You cannot act as the employer's employee. Okay.
Yeah. Hope it's clear. Okay, the second question is from Engineer Mansoor. He mentioned, can we get this document for study? Yes, you will be receiving this presentation in our social media accounts and also in our website, including LinkedIn and YouTube. You will find also the recording. The next question is from Khawaja Kashif. Is FIDIC used by Aramco, SEC, and 𝗃𝗵? Are they used bespoke? Actually, something is asking that is the Aramco and SECs and 𝗃𝗵 are using the FIDIC?
So they are not using FIDIC. They have bespoke contracts. And I will tell you one more thing. The contracts that I've seen from even 𝗃𝗂𝗏 and 𝗃𝗑𝗑𝗏, they say it's FIDIC, but it's not FIDIC. Because whenever you're going to make changes to a FIDIC contract, you have to do it through particular conditions. That's what Roshan is doing. But then Roshan is changing a lot. They have a 50-page particular conditions. So in other words, now nobody's using FIDIC. These are FIDIC-inspired contracts, you can say.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is from Kashif Khan. Actually, he raised 3 questions. The first one is the current geopolitical situation fall under the umbrella of the force majeure in KSA? Like, I think he's referring to the war situation.
Yeah. So I don't think Saudi has announced force majeure. So when it comes to, so there are exceptional events as per FIDIC 2017. See what your contract says. And then there are force majeures. So look, force majeures, you have to establish that. And normally if the government announces a force majeure, only then you can proceed with it, especially for termination, because the termination is going to be under the law. Okay, it's not going to be contractual termination. Now, when a force majeure leads to limited performance issues and you have a time and cost claim, then I can understand that you can raise that point. It's better to raise that point under exceptional events. Now, if we talk about this particular war, the war is not in Saudi Arabia. As per FIDIC, yes, you can claim time and cost there. But if you see the different contracts prepared by the employers, 𝗃𝗏𝗏, 𝗃𝗑𝗑𝗏, Aramco, whatever, they exclude it and they want the war to be within the country if you want to claim anything under that. Okay, so look at the particular conditions of contract, how they are drafted, then you can see how you can claim. Certain events have to occur within the country. As per FIDIC, war is not one of them, but perhaps in your contract war is also one of them.
Yeah, I hope it's clear. The next question from his, how to calculate EOT claim is there is no accepted work program.
Yeah, this happens a lot when there's a baseline program not approved. Then how are you going to claim? So you're gonna claim it on the base of the program that you have submitted and that is under discussion. Okay, so that's how you're gonna keep it. And there will be a time when the baseline program will be approved, and then you can modify your EOT claim accordingly.
Yeah. The next question is from 𝗂𝗂𝗃 𝗵𝗲. He's talking against the same issue for the VAR, which I believe that you have already answered. And then the next question is from Mr. Raza. He's asking the copy. Yes, you will be receiving copy in our social media accounts. Okay, then again, the 𝗂𝗂𝗃 𝗵𝗲. In your experience, what are the most critical records and supporting documents that contractor often overlook when substantiating the claim for variation, EOT, and prolongation cost?
So look, all the important documents. What are the important documents? First of all, whenever you're going to claim your people, you make sure that your daily reports have the records and attendance of those people. Okay, so you're claiming a cost for your superintendents, but then those people were absent from the project, so you cannot claim it to the employer. And then every cost that you're going to claim, for example, your site office administration cost. Okay, there's fuel coming in, there is expenditure of stationery or goods or whatever else, petty cash records. So all these costs should be substantiated with bills. Okay, only bills will prove that this cost has been spent on the project. Okay, so the contractors, what they miss is, I've seen the smaller contractors, they don't keep proper records. It's just you have to keep all the cost related records on the project. That's it. Whatever you're going to claim, you have to have the record of that.
Yeah.
And they miss out, I must say, they miss out the financial costs, by the way. Okay, and they don't realize that they can claim the financial costs.
Yeah, thank you. The next question is from Anwar Ali. If the contractor is not able to show the extension in schedule, then they can get an EOT as there may be a wrong relationship in the schedule. So like he's saying, maybe in the baseline, there is a different relationship is not correct. So
then that's your problem. I don't know, maybe a planner can discuss this in a better way, but if you cannot substantiate the EOT with the delay analysis, then you have no claim.
Okay, clear. The next question is, does the early warning notice have to be formal or minutes of meeting, or an email is sufficient?
It has to be a formal notice because it says notice.
The next question is from Muhammad Kabir. When is the mitigation measure supposed to be taken by the contractor?
All the time.
Yeah, it's
all the time.
Okay, this is real. Okay, it's something general. Can we get the recording? Yes, you will be getting. Okay. Then there is a Khwaja Kashif Saab. If the contract provision FIDIC term conflict with the law of the country, like as per the Saudi law, okay, he's asking something that if there is a conflict in the law and the contract itself, okay, what should be followed?
Law takes precedence over the contract.
Oh, clear. Then
so you have to know two things, by the way, here.
Yeah.
Okay, if it's in conflict, then law will take precedence. But in some cases, law allows you to make your own agreements. Okay, so if law is saying something else and contract is saying something else, then yeah, law will be followed. But in such cases where law allows you to have your own agreements, then the contract will be followed.
Clear. Next question is from Ḥummad Hamza. Is asking if the contract is silent on the delay analysis method to be used, should one go as per the FIDIC for selecting the type of the analysis or what? He's asking for how if there is no defined method of doing the delay analysis, so what should they do?
They can agree with an engineer on a methodology. They can propose a methodology and discuss with the engineer, and you can reach an agreement.
Okay, the next question is from Muhammad Iqbal. It's a similar question under FIDIC, where the contract is silent on the delay analysis methodology. Can the engineer request the contractor to submit a specific delay analysis? Yeah, as you mentioned, I think this also cover. Then next question
but
is,
if it's not a, by the way, and if it's not a standard delay analysis method, then the contractor can even ask for a variation and an instruction first before you proceed with the variation.
Clear. The next question is from 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗃. Is asking if the quantity increased by 5 times, e.g. utility identification and tender PIQ. Okay, but during the utility survey by third party, is execution quantity become 4 to 5 times. Then what could be the best practice? The rate of course will not cover such difference in quantity. I think he's referring something in a lump sum contract where the quantity increased 5 times more than what they have put it under the PIQ.
So I think he's confusing two things here. I'll address both the things. First thing is, if it's a variation and the quantity is increased by 4 to 5 times, okay, then can you change the rates? Yeah, you can talk about that with the engineer. It's better not to change the rates, then you'll have to make more substantiation why the rates need to be changed, because you have to then provide the logistic measures to handle that quantity, storage, whatever else. Okay, that's one thing. Now the second thing is, you might be asking that due to survey there were different quantities, there was something wrong in the survey. Then you have to see who did the survey. Was the survey report provided by the employer, or survey was done by you? If you did the survey and the quantities were wrong, it's your risk. If the employer provided you that survey report, then there's a clause in FIDIC, sometimes it's removed from the contract, 4.7, I think that's the clause, where you can say, raise a claim based on the quantities, okay, based on the mistakes in the reports provided by the employer or documentation provided by the employer.
Yeah, oh, it's clear for him. Okay, Rizwan Ijasa is asking, what is the meaning of the value engineering adopted? Contractor is entitled to 50% of the cost saving. Please describe more.
So as I gave one example, that for example the project was based on steel structure, okay, and then the employer or the engineer issues a request for value engineering that change it to concrete structure. This will reduce the value of the works. Contract price will be reduced, right? So value engineering proposals are requested for two main reasons. The first is to reduce the value of the works, okay? For example, you can make changes on the furniture, you can make changes on the finishes, you can ask for local items instead of imported items, things like that, to reduce the cost. So whenever you reduce the cost, as per FIDIC, let's say it was 100 million and the cost is now reduced to 90 million, there's a saving of 10 million. So as per FIDIC, you can request 5 million of the cost saving. 50% of the cost saving here will be 5 million, right? You can make an argument of that my revenue is now reducing, my profit is now reducing, so I am entitled to cost saving, if the cost saving percentage is not agreed before then. That's the argument you can use. Now, another thing is, you ask for a value engineering proposal when you want more value for your project, okay? Now, this can do both, reduce the cost or even increase the cost, okay? And if the cost is increased, the cost is increased. If it is reduced, then you can ask for the savings.
Thank you. Next question is from Muhammad Azim. He's asking whether a delay notice issued for a non-receipt of NOC an event to the contractor, apply and trigger the timeline of submission of detailed claim within 42 days. What if the contractor does not pursue and submit a detailed claim within a stipulated time?
Yeah, so this happens quite often. So what we do is when we send notices as a contractor, we say that the further particulars will follow in due course. Okay. Basically, you have to submit the claim in 42 days if that's what the contract says. And the better practice would be, if you cannot submit it in 42 days, you request for more time to submit it. Okay. This is something that is not enforced as much here. But the 28 days, the notice of claim, that is enforced religiously. Okay. So make sure you do not miss a notice, and you send follow-up letters stating that you will need more time or you're working on the claim. It's going to be submitted in due course. This is something that we've normally used because it takes a lot of time to compile a claim.
Thank you. Next question is from Mohammad Hussain. He's asking if our claim is time-based, meaning we are not serving a notice within 28 days. Our claim is substantiated. Only one mistake is to serve off notice more than 28 days. Have a contractor right to win the claim in arbitration?
Yeah, when it goes to dispute, then under the law they can claim it, but that is under the dispute. They have given away their, and it's not certain, by the way. Again, it's a chance. Under the law, when you go into dispute in arbitration or in court, you may get it. But under the contract, you have no right.
Okay, next question is from Muhammad Khalil. To what extent could the FIDIC general condition be amended? Any rule?
So FIDIC has provided their guide for the particular conditions. And I think there's a book on it. You can go through it. The essence of the contract should not be changed. You know, small things can be changed here and there, but that's not what we see here being practiced. Okay, so there is no hard line. FIDIC does not put a hard line that do not change beyond this limit. There are guidelines to what you should change or what you can change, but there's no hard line. That's why, for example, in Russian contract, we see a massively changed particular conditions of 50 pages.
Clear. Next question is from Anik Said. What are the common gaps between contract design and field performance? Do we close them in practice?
I don't know what it means exactly. What he's asking in terms of contracts?
Yes, something is not clear. So you can contact us on our WhatsApp, Anik, and we can guide you further after some clarification. Then is Ahmad Zahur. In your experience, what is the biggest reason EOT claim failed under FIDIC despite genuine project delay?
So a lot of reasons are there. All the requirements that are under the contract, the contractors usually fail in those. Number one is the notice. Number two, they are unable to establish entitlement. Okay, there are requirements of the notice, by the way, like I discussed before. Then the substantiation, they do not have contemporary records. Okay, their delay analysis is not very good, and there are concurrent delays. That's why they don't get the entitlement. Okay, so there are contractor delays. Good contractors are good at basically hiding those under the delay analysis, or they are good at documenting those delays as not their delays, but associated with things beyond their control. Okay, so for example, a contractor has delayed its performance which was not impacted by, let's say, any change done or any other delay event for which the employer is responsible. But the contractor can link it. He can still argumentatively link it to such an event. For example, the employer is changing the design, and again, a lot of things have been changing, and the contractor's performance is being disrupted. So he can proceed with the disruption claim. Okay, so the contract's interpretation can be done in different ways. It depends how you link your delay to a particular interpretation for disruption or particular interpretation for anything else. Okay, so your delays need to be covered one way or the other so that you can get the delays done by the employer.
Okay. Next question is from Muhammad Sajid. He's asking for, are we going to arrange a new session for Silver Book and Yellow Book? Yes. Please keep on eyes on our LinkedIn page and our website, and soon we'll be working on that, and we will be announcing something there. Then okay, there's something general. Our project value is 32. Okay, here is actually something asking, I don't know, maybe answerable because of the context. Our project value is 32 million, but the employer has issued the work through multiple delivery order with a new pay item instead of releasing the full scope. This
Can you
has
repeat it, please?
caused
Can you please restart it? Sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, actually, he's asking something that their contract, the project value was a 32 million, and there is a multiple work order they have issued by the contractor. Okay, which was impacting the project was delay in the mobilization, and overall project was delay. And he's asking, can this be considered valid ground for an extension of time and our delay claims?
Yeah,
It's something. Yeah.
Yeah, it has
You
to be
can
linked
give an example.
how your program is being impacted. So just like we said that whenever there's a variation, you can have prolongation. You have to impact it on the program. Okay, so there is a possibility of it. Sometimes it will impact the project, sometimes it will not. How it will impact, that's why you have to show it in the program, and you have to impact the critical path. If it extends, then it extends.
Yeah, next question again from Ali Raza is asking if the contract stipulated that the delay damages to be applied on final contract price and not the accepted contract price. How in practical term DT shall be applied then based on upcoming VO, etc. The per day deduction will charge at the project proceed. How to handle such situation? If something is asking simply how the delay damages will be applied. It is going to be applied on the revised contract price or in the
if the contract is revised, the price is revised, then because it says contract price. Okay.
Yeah.
So when the contract price is revised, it is revised automatically. So it will be applied on that if that's what the contract says. It's better to have a value given to the delay damages for each section or for the works per day. It's better to have it like that and agreed. It makes things, if you're the employer, it makes things much easier because employer has to substantiate the delay damages, by the way, when he applies.
Next question is from 𝗀𝗵𝗃. If the employer does not appoint the engineer of the project as required under the contract, what action should be taken by the contractor?
Contractor should ask for that.
This is normally many practices are going.
It's small in smaller projects. Yeah, the contractors do not know this, and the employer doesn't know this. In smaller projects, this happens. Then look, the contractor should ask for the engineer to be appointed. Okay.
Yeah. The next question is from Tahir. If there is a FIDIC inspired contract and the method of measurement is not clear, how to prepare a variation in terms of method of measurement?
Okay, method of measurement should be issued. Okay, so how to do it? Then again, how was BOQ measured?
That's something.
Okay, that's the way you have to follow. Now, in this BOQ, there could be some mistakes, and it happens in smaller projects that whoever measures the BOQ measures certain items in a certain way and the other items in another way. So then you have to follow the BOQ. The way BOQ was measured, you measure those items that way.
Thank you. I think no, we are almost running the time, so I will ask only last question. How to check whether, I think this is a general discussion, due to the force majeure, if the work is stopped, then contractor will be eligible to claim of the EOT if yet what is process. And he's asking if there is, how he can claim the cost in the force majeure.
So in force majeure, he can claim the cost except for the natural disaster. That's what FIDIC says. So you can claim the cost if whatever cost you're incurring during that period, by the way. It is very important to know that if the project is on hold or is it delayed, then you are going to claim the cost incurred during that period. Okay. So if you have demobilized people during that time, then you cannot claim that cost. You can claim the demobilization and the remobilization cost. So you can claim the cost, in other words.
Okay, thank you again, Hassan Saab. Such a valuable and insightful session on the contractor administration. On behalf of the PIQS and everyone attending today, we are truly appreciate you take your time to share your knowledge and practical experience with us. And I would like also to thank you all participants for joining today's webinar and for engaging throughout the session. A quick reminder again, if you have already, if you haven't done already, please fill out the attendance form if you want to get the CPD certificate. We hope you find today's session useful, and we look forward to having you with us in our upcoming webinar. Thank you all, and have a good day ahead.
Thank you so much,
Assalamu alaikum.
Adil.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, guys all.